culture war claim that all cultures are the same and we should be multicultural. No, we shouldn't. We should be Christian. And we're going to try to explain why. And it is not sufficient simply to hold the cross up and say, this is our banner, rally around it, let's go to war. Guys, it's not going to do it.
Like football teams.
It's not going to do it.
Football teams.
Yeah, you don't get to just be Aztec versus, Christian and rally and fight on teams.
No, I have to put a little asterisk into this because Australians tend to use the word multiculturalism, a euphemism for multiracial, but they're different categories. So when we say multicultural, we're not talking about ethnicity, we're talking about culture, we're talking about religion.
We're talking about cult. Yes. We're actually talking about worship.
Yeah. No,
or cultivation,
if I say,
or all those things that are actually cultures.
No, if I say in Australia I'm against multiculturalism, people are they're shocked and they're outraged and they think I'm
Yes, we need to distinguish before them between cult and the Mass and Pentecost.
Okay, so we've got the twin pairs there. Mm-hmm. We've got the Aztec, and then we've got Christ in the Mass, and these two rituals are the basis of the cultivation of people.
Right.
These are two different cults. So this is the basis of cultivating, this is the basis of creating the culture. It's got zero to do with ethnicity and everything to do with the orientation point for the human soul.
There's a reason that there's an ambivalence, equivocation in your Australian use of multicultural to say ethnic. Because there is a way in which the cult is the ethnos.
I agree with that, I just have to break it down for the basic Stacey's in the back.
There is a way in which the culture, this sacrifice creates the people. It's exactly what creates the people. Therefore, it is actually ethnic. Right. Never heard anybody actually lay out the argument in the way that we're about to try to make it necessary for Christianity, but not make it into yet another of these ethnic
red team, blue team
ethnic cults.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this is, I mean, this is what people fear. It's like, oh, you just say your God is the only God. But what about this other group of people? They say their God's the only God. Clearly, we just have battling gods, and you should stop, arguing that yours is the only one and stop trying to make everybody be Christian. Audience.
Well, they're relegating religions to being soda pop. So it's Coke versus Pepsi from the vending machine. I mean, this is how Western civilization sees religion. You choose Coke, you choose Pepsi, it's Dr. Pepper, Mountain Dew, whatever. Everything's equivocal. It doesn't matter.
Right. And what we need to sort of, the first step here is to unpack why Western civilization sees religion that way, as, vending machine choices of different sodas. So what do we see right now? What I'm showing on the screen is a Spanish drawn image of the Aztec sacrifice where the victim is lying on his back. I understand from the Mel Gibson movie Apocalypto why they have to lie on their back, because that means that you can just cut under the ribs, right, and pull the heart out.
Yes.
I don't think I'd ever appreciated that way. So they've thrown him. They've got him over his back so that he can pull the heart through the gut, I guess, under the ribs. And what's very interesting in this image is we have the heart sort of flying up in the air, which seems strange, on this ribbon of blood, and according to the myth, apparently, this is the way the sun gets fed.
In their minds, they're feeding the source of all life with the hearts of human beings.
Right. Without that blood source, the sun goes out.
So for them, doing this ritual, doing this human sacrifice is literally a matter of life or death.
It's a matter of existence for the whole physical world, because they see the sun as feeding on these blood gifts. Therefore, they also see, this is one of the reasons that in the multicultural debates, it's sometimes been argued, well, but those victims, the people, and I think they're usually men. I don't think they did women. No, they did do women, because Diaz sees them in the cages. But the people who are killed in this way do it voluntarily.
Is that accurate?
One of our famous accounts of how these people are collected together is in Bernal Diaz's account of the conquest of Mexico, and he said the Spanish found them all in cages, collected to be sent. I mean, it seems like they're taken as prisoners of war, captives, and sent as tribute from the surrounding towns to Mexico City, where they're sacrificed. I mean, this is in Apocalypto. It's really well done, right? Just saying that the whole group, the whole crowd,
Gibson did a beautiful
watching this ceremony, sees it as necessary for their own flourishing. In Apocalypto, in the movie, they do it well because the men, sort of as they're about to be sacrificed, are telling to each other, like, die well, right? Die courageously, so that you don't go weeping and moaning. And so there's a dignity to it in the sacrifices.
In my head now, I have this picture of Aztec life, and the entire economy of the Aztec civilization relies on this sacrifice. Mm-hmm. This is central to their economic understanding because they're still agrarian. So they need the sun. The sun is the source of everything. This human sacrifice is central to the currency of the Aztecs, which is sunshine, to grow their crops. So it really wouldn't matter if they were volunteers or not, because in their head, I'm just thinking like they're completing a circuit. Volunteering or war captives, it wouldn't matter because in their head they're feeding the battery of their civilization. I find it very interesting that modern people are trying to justify this by saying it's voluntary.
Oh well,
it's like justifying indentured servitude. You're a slave. Oh, it's okay, you're indentured, so it's not real slavery. You're kind of semi-volunteering. It's very odd, sort of a very tricky category distinction there.
And yet we just did it. As Casey said, sounds like the Aztecs were worried about global cooling. And then, Casey's on a roll tonight. Involuntary volunteers, quote, you voluntarily took that COVID vaccine. Why would they think this is the reality? Right. Well, because, as Gerard explains, they have myth. Or they have stories about how this is necessary. And it's sort of like myths embody we had myths about science and the necessity of following science, and the consensus is huge here, right? It's like the scientific consensus says, well, okay. What's interesting about this from Gerard's perspective is you've just read the description of a murder. In the mythologies, and this plays out in things like the Assyrian mythologies and Marduk and stuff like that, or Kronos eating his children. And you have the gods being cut in pieces and scattered around, or the gods dying, and then because what Gerard hypothesizes is that all of these stories actually have at their core a collective murder of an innocent victim. The significant thing about all of them is the group either first makes the victim completely guilty and then makes the victim a god. What is horrifying to recognize is that all human society seems to come out of this kind of collective activity, and the collective activity is centered on the identification of the one to blame for whatever bad thing is happening. The crops are failing, there's a plague, there's it's too much rain, what are the other, you're going to blame one person, kill them, whatever happens afterwards, it seems to be better. And so you repeat this ritually. This is how you end up with rituals like we need to feed the sun with the blood. The masks, in fact, gave everybody difference because you wore different masks. They all started wearing like brand colors. Here's my big mask theory now, I think, right? That I wore these belly dancer masks, and I realized I liked them because they moved, right? So the thing I disliked about the masks for most people is they were static. The mimesis is erased because your face is covered in that muffling way. And I like my belly dancer mask because the beads move. And so you get this feeling you get this sensation of life. People became I think they become very attached to the mask because it gave them a belonging. It's livery. It's colors. It gave them the colors that they wanted to participate in, and in my gang colors. They gave them gang colors. And in the posts that I'm using all my Bitmojis with all these different colored masks. The app would generate for your face, and sort of saying, I get this, right? It's as you and I've just been. It's wanting to be in the light, in the color, taking on the color of all of it's like, and they were coloring their faces in effect.
So that effect is kind of like being on the internet and not homogenized by it. It's the resistance to internetization.
Curiously, yes. But there's also the sort of loss of your face, the degree to which it is out here in the internet, projected into the digital constantly, and the masks were at least physical. You were protected, right? I think they were protection against a lot of this.
Yeah, well, it's like Michael Jackson started to mask, probably as the effect of having been paparazzi'd to death, right. The constant stealing of your image. The only way of guarding that is by covering up. People can't get you when you've got something across your face in that way. So they're hiding their identity to preserve it.
Right.
In this constant loss of it.
And interestingly enough, I mean, again, you and I have talked about this. It's like we're trying to develop manners for all of these different e-duchies.
Yes.
What happened after in 2020 was the global e-world shattered into all of these locals. I mean, I think this is, I mean, my theory of the lockdowns too. I think people actually wanted to stay home. Whatever Floyd was the sacrifice for, this spiraling rivalry of sameness, I think, was a lot of it. Cain is the founder of cities, but he's murdered Abel, right? So the founding of a city is it's this collective coming together to throw out the demon, then makes the city have a transcendent understanding of itself as a collective, and that transcendence gives birth to the divinity.
The deification of the scapegoat.
Right.
And this is why, I mean, a lot of the conversations we've had in the chat too is with people who are arguing against urban environments and arguing against cities, because Cain was the one that built the city and he was evil and he was the manslayer.
Right.
The problem is that we are inherently city dwellers and we're looking forward to the heavenly Jerusalem. So the issue isn't necessarily cities are evil, it's that this mechanism is human from the beginning.
Right.
The mechanism of murder as a civilization cornerstone, which reveals more about us as human beings than it does necessarily about the city itself. The city being the reflection of us, our violent tendencies needing that violent unity in order to stay cohesive.
The feeling of this collective reality, that I think is what is so mysterious. It's vexed social scientists, since there was social science about 100 years ago. Again, Girard he's making fun of all the social scientists, saying, don't you realize that religion is at the center of all human society?
Well, it's a collective reality. It's a shared story to cultivate people. If you don't share the story, you don't share the reality. The Jim Bob cartoon that we showed last week in the stream with the girl in the Disney outfit and the little girl holding the Bible, and the child in the Disney outfit is saying to her, oh, my mom says you've been indoctrinated. Different doctrine, different reality. So we have to have a shared story.
It's not just the shared story, it's that shared activity. The actual transcendence of the mob, to be in this mob that goes after the victim. The victim becomes to the mob a monster who deserves to die because the monster's carried all of this evil. The mob kills the monster. The monster is, because they've acted together. I mean, what I keep thinking is like it's the chimpanzees killing in a group, right? That collective murder is going to be frenzied. It's Bacchic. It's the Dionysian ripping apart of the King of Thieves. Michael Jones uses that story a lot to say, this is what the sort of lack of
restraint.
Right, the lack of restraint looks like. It's horror, but Girard would be saying it's like, well, this is actually what created the feeling of common activity. Well,
you're participating in the mythology, so you don't get it until you participate in the mythology, which is an argument for liturgy,
right?
Which goes back to where we were starting out, trying to explain why the scholastics talking about the Trinity is different to the liturgical understanding of God, because it's experiential. So trying to explain why this thing happened is not the same as going in the march through the city and having the same collective experience with everyone else chasing the monster. One's liturgical, and it's the living participation in the mythology that makes the difference. That's why they transcend, because they're eating the scapegoat. And then there's a connection with the idolatry, the connection with the deified monster personally. Then there's the cult.
You pointed out that the Ortho-Bro community tends to like those scholastic debates. Guess how they're doing them? Online. Together. Ritually. I think the debates are a ritual too, and that's why they're so compelling for them. It's not because they're making good arguments. Gotcha. It's because you wanted the ritual. You wanted to be in it.
Yeah.
You wanted to be in the stream.